It is Thursday, and it's another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Matt Duffy had some comments about the Royals, and I think we should all agree with it. The bullpen is looking a little bit better, and this could be one of the last times we see Zach Greinke at Kauffman Stadium. That's all coming up next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And find our podcast on wherever you listen to all your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, and you can find us on YouTube. We're about 10 subscribers away from 500. The goal is to get to 500 before the end of the 2023 regular season for the Kansas City Royals. So be sure to hit that subscribe button on our YouTube homepage. If this is your first episode ever tuning in to Locked On Royals, of course, welcome in. And I am a diehard Royals fan, just like I'm assuming you are if you're tuning into this episode for a team that is 46-101 in mid-September. But I just turned that fandom and turned it into a career path. Now work here in Kansas City for Sports Radio 810 WHB, have a daily show on ESPN Kansas City, and once a week, I've got a show on Sports Radio 810 WHB from 7 to 10. Usually that's on Tuesday or Wednesday. But if you want to hear my thoughts on things other than the Royals, just go to my Twitter page at JohnnyJ_15. I will tweet out links so you can find it on the 810 podcasting page and just tune in or on your radio dial or find a way to stream it because it's very easy if you just go ahead and follow me on Twitter. Today's show is brought to you by Jase Medical. We'll have a little bit more on them in about 20 minutes or so. They're a brand new sponsor, so we want to give them much love in today's episode. But today's episode, we are going to dive into three different things, as we usually do. One of them makes me think a lot differently of a player that is currently employed by the Kansas City Royals. Secondly, this can be a positive spin here. This bullpen's been terrible all year long, and I'm not trying to say that now it's going to be really good in 2024. This is simply pointing out some numbers, and I get their September numbers. I got heat for it on Twitter a little bit for just bringing up September numbers. Hey, all I'm doing is just tweeting out stats. They are there. They are factual as long as my math is correct, and you can take it for what it is. They're just better pitchers at this point in the season. They look a little bit better. They're walking less guys. They're getting more outs, something we didn't see in the first half of the year. But let's kick it off and talk about Matt Duffy, who I think said some things that every Royals fan out there has been thinking all along. And as we inch nearer and nearer to the end of the regular season and the final minutes drain off this season, a dismal season for the Kansas City Royals, there's one thing that I think could make it worse. And that's the front office, speaking to the media after this season is done and saying, well, there was a lot of positives that happened. We loved the growth from Bobby Witt Jr. We saw things from Michael Garcia. Cole Reagans was great. There was a lot of positives. That, to me, would make this season even worse. Because you have a front office that is going to spin a 100-plus loss season into a win for the organization. You can't do that. Even though this was an evaluation year, you have to look yourself in the mirror and go, this is not what we expected. We expected these guys to be just a little bit better than losing 105 to 110 games, to break the franchise record in losing for a single season. I'm sure that was not on the radar for the front office or ownership. I'm sure they knew it was going to be a tough year, but this goes beyond that. And so Matt Duffy, who I have harped on before, and I question why he's still on the roster. The Royals feel like is a bench bat. You don't want to bring up a rookie to sit on the bench. Just let him continue out the season. At this point, 15 or so games left. Just let him ride it out. I didn't expect Matt Duffy to make the roster back in spring training. He did, and he stuck it out the entire way. But he was very candid in the latest article from the Kansas City Star, which I thought was a great article. Just kind of reviewing and recapping this year. But he was blunt, and he had to say this in the article. I think however you try to sugarcoat it, when you are talking about one of the worst records in baseball, it would be insulting to fans to say it's been a lot of positives. And it's simple, and it's not like he said anything groundbreaking, but to me, to hear that authenticity, that honesty from a player, especially for a guy that's been here for 1 year, that's important to me. That's very important because a lot of these guys are playing in the bigs for the first time, and Matt Duffy's been on a lot of successful teams before. And for the fans out there that continue to pay money, to continue to follow this team, talk about the team, tweet about the team, post about the team, just engage with this team, they deserve better than what this team has put out there. A good September, a strong second half, it doesn't erase what the fans went through in the first half of the season. I mean, the Royals were out of it by April. One of the earliest exits, I think, of postseason contention that we've seen in Royals history. I mean, they were cooked. They were done 15 to 20 games in. I mean, you just could tell at that point it was going to be a long season. You thought it'd get a little bit better. I certainly thought it wasn't going to get this bad, this poor of play. But here we are. I mean, your record is who you are. You can't say, well, a lot of one-run games they blew, got screwed over in Boston on the check swing call. I don't need any of that. You lost 101 games, fair and square. And you can't sugarcoat it, like Matt Duffy said. He is saying what every fan out there is trying to say. It would sting if the ownership, if the front office spoke to the media and said, we learned a lot and we had a lot of positives. Guys played well. They battled through it. They fought through adversity. That is an aspect of this team. They fought a lot, but they lost a lot. And in a career, in a profession, in a sport like this, all that matters is winning. Unfortunately, a guy can work really hard. A guy can be a great guy. That doesn't mean he's a winner. That doesn't mean he is going to be a fit for your team in the future. And I'm hoping the Royals, just like they were last year, and axing Dayton Moore, they're more cutthroat about what they're going to do in 2024. There's some fans out there that believe, hey, it's going to be pretty similar next year, where they're going to need to evaluate again. I don't think you need to evaluate again. I think in a full season, you know who a player is. Guys can have slumps. Guys can have sophomore slumps. They can go through rough patches, but you can tell in a full season, 162-game sample size, who a certain guy is going to be if they're an everyday player. And right now, I think you have 3 position players who have locked in that they are everyday players. You bring Salvador Perez back, he's a 4th. Maybe Freddie Fermin has snuck into that conversation. Michael Massey, as good as he's been of late, still got a ways to go. MJ Melendez, still a ways to go. Waters, Isbell, ways to go. And I would love to see this front office, just be brutally honest. This was a failure of a season in terms of, evaluating the talent that you had, because even though you did what you were supposed to do, you're supposed to evaluate, see what these guys had. The failure is you probably put too much stock into a handful of these guys that just were never going to be big league ball players. So I appreciate Matt Duffy saying, hey, when you have one of the worst records in baseball, you can't go in front of the media and say, guys, we're fighting. We're a team that grinds it out and we're feeling a lot better. No, you need to be very brutal and blunt about this. It's been a bad season. Now, I've gotten this comment on Twitter before. I think it's a great question. It's a great opinion that you treat 2023 like spring training. And I promise I'm not trying to be too harsh here. But there were a lot of failures to this year. And even though this was kind of treated like spring training, see what you got, all the young guys got to go out there and play. I see that side of it. The Royals accomplished what they were supposed to. The failure is not evaluating. They did evaluate. They saw what a lot of these guys had. The failure is some of these guys that maybe you thought were long-term fits are just not long-term fits. And that's why it's a little bit more frustrating as the season comes to a close, because Brady Singer took a big step back. Last year, you said, okay, that's our anchor. That's our workhorse. There's our number one. Daniel Lynch didn't build this year. Chris Bubich couldn't build this year. Jackson Cora has been better of late. We'll talk about him shortly. Michael Massey, early on, took steps back. MJ Melendez took steps back. Kyle Isbell couldn't stay healthy. Drew Waters took steps back. He had a good stretch, but took steps back. And that's why I think in a spring training sample size, for one of the commenters on Twitter, it's a great opinion. It's a great point. But I also think in a business of winning, how much longer can you say, Well, they just got to evaluate. I get they're starting from ground zero, but if they go into 2024 with the same goal, hey, we got to evaluate again, you're not going to get a lot of support. And I'm glad Matt Duffy said this. I'm hoping that once this season is over, you will get some words from J.J. Picollo and John Sherman. And John Sherman has said it. It's unacceptable. But, the way you can fix all of it rather than just take blame and say, hey, I got to be better. I got to look myself in the mirror. You got to show it. J.J. Picollo, I think he's found a couple of key guys. Cole Reagan's found a key guy there. A couple of draft picks. Going back to last year, Javier Vaz has been a gem. Mason Barnett's been a gem. In this year's draft, Carson Rocafort, Jared Dickey, Spencer Nivens, Hunter Owen, all guys that hidden gems. But still the farm system is bare, and the major league roster is pretty bare. Now, I get it. It was a spring training type of year. See what you got in a lot of guys. But how much did you truly find out? And who is all going to be a future fit? It's a good opinion. It's a good debate. But I think what Matt Duffy said is what we're all thinking. That, this is a season where there weren't many positives. When you lose 100-plus games, I'm sorry, it's 100-plus games. You can't spin it and say, well, we saw a lot of good. You didn't see a lot of good. You saw a little good. Bobby Witt Jr., Michael Garcia, Cole Reagan's, 3 good right there. Other than that, there wasn't much positives. There weren't many positives. There wasn't much success. And that's just where we're at the end of the 2023 season. All right, we're going to take our first break here. When we come back, let's talk about this bullpen. Now, I caught some heat on Twitter for bringing up September numbers. I get it. I can deserve a little bit of that criticism. All I'm doing, though, is pointing out some numbers. And the younger guys in this bullpen have been much better in this month of September. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to one of today's title sponsors in eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the right prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. I understand that September numbers are skewed. When you're in a spot like the Royals are, which is 46 and 101, you're not playing in any meaningful games. To some of these young guys, it's meaningful because this may be their only chance or this may be their first chance to play at the big league level. So it matters. And that series against the White Sox, it's a bad White Sox team. It's also a White Sox team that is checked out. And I know they looked better last night, but it's simply a team that's still fighting the Royals and a team that's mailed in and that's done for at this point. And that's Chicago White Sox. However, you go from the beginning of the month of September, the bullpen has been a little bit better. Now, some of these guys have come in low leverage spots, blowouts, 5-1 games in Toronto, where you're not needing to hold down a lead. But nonetheless, they're numbers. And there's a couple of things in there that make me think, these are guys that maybe going into spring training, you just give a little bit of a longer look at. Now, a month ago, a handful of these guys, I'd say, I just don't need to see them again. I really don't. I don't need to see these guys at the big league level. I know they're going to fail. I know they're going to falter. But once my instincts kicked in and my logic kicked in, I know that the Royals are not going to purge the entire bullpen. It's just not the way it works. They don't want to replace 8 guys in the bullpen. But now I'm starting to see that there was some reasoning by the way they assembled this bullpen, especially of late. I think for a long time, I questioned what the Royals were doing with James McArthur. You go out there and you trade an 18-year-old lottery ticket guy from a barren farm system to go get a 26-year-old journeyman in the minor leagues. He had a big frame and he had one good pitch, and it was his curveball. But it was one of those moves where you said, if this works out, that's a very Tampa Bay Ray type of move. You see value in a guy, you go out there and get him, you like a certain pitch, you like the spin rate, you like the velocity, you make that deal. And James McArthur comes in, his major league debut is an utter disaster. He gives up 6 or 7 runs in one inning against Cleveland, and then never really rebounds. He just looked terrible. He was optioned the night after, I think it was that same night of his major league debut. It was ugly. But since September, has anybody known what James McArthur has done? Now, I get it. It's September. To some of you, that doesn't matter. The win-loss record, that's all that matters. Don't pay attention to any numbers. Well, James McArthur has allowed 1 hit and 7 outings. His whip in his last 7 outings, and in the month of September, is 0.14. Now, a guy like Jackson Kowar, we talked about a little bit. He's found himself. He's not walking as many guys. Angel Serpa looked terrible starting for the Royals this year as an opener. It didn't look good. But in this role now, he's found his footing. He's working back to more of a comfortable level where he was last year before the injury. He's been pretty good in September. Steven Cruz, like James McArthur, got lit up in his debut. He has not allowed a run since. And that's been over the course of 5, 6, 7 outings. Colin Snyder, who threw, I think it was 13 consecutive balls. Maybe it was 12. I know that he walked the bases loaded. It was basically Major League Part 2 with Rick Vaughn, just couldn't find the zone, was missing by 10 feet. Colin Snyder's looked okay in the month of September. And Colin Snyder, to begin last year, might have been the Royals' best bullpen arm. Then something happened and all the command was lost and guys were starting to hit him around a little bit. It wasn't good. But this is the Colin Snyder I'd hope to see again. Power sinker, good velocity. You need that in the bullpen. That's something you can work with. So you take Steven Cruz, you take Jackson Kowar, you take Colin Snyder, you take James McArthur, and you take Angel Serpa. 5 guys there. Their ERA is 1.17 in 30 innings in the month of September. To some of you, doesn't matter. That's fine. I get it. Because September numbers have been a problem for the Royals in the past, where you buy into a guy and say, hey, he's much better now. And then in spring training in the regular season next year in April and May, that guy's not very good. But I will say, it's important to me because I needed to see if these guys could ever become something. Because it's still the big leagues. It's still the major leagues. Some teams are mailing in. Toronto last weekend was not mailing it in. That's a team that's still fighting for a wild card spot. The White Sox, I understand it there. I can see your side of it. But to me, I needed to see, why did they trade for Steven Cruz? What did they see in Steven Cruz? Well, high velocity, power fastball, power slider. We saw that as an opener the other day. And that was one of his more efficient outings in just throwing strikes. That was a huge problem for him last year and this year at the minor league level. James McArthur was terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. And I'm going, why did they trade for him? What did they see? This, to me, is the version they saw of him. Power curveball. I mean, he came on for Alec Marsh the other night, a big spot. It's 5-1. They'd blown a 9-run lead the day before. It was starting to look like that again. First and third, 1 out, rolls up the double play ball. Comes back out the next inning, easy and efficient. Low pitch count, throwing strikes, getting out. This is what I think they saw in James McArthur. They'd always wanted Colin Snyder to find himself again. He's still struggling with command a bit more so than the rest of the guys. But you're starting to see, okay, when that sinker's on, he's tough to hit because anytime you have a guy that throws a 96, 97 mile an hour sinker, it works. That can play in the bullpen. Jackson Kowar has never been a good pitcher at the big league level, but his velocity is good. His changeup is good. He's just never been able to locate it. Maybe he's tipping his pitches. The numbers never supported it. And now for the first time in his career, he's had a string of outings where he's been pretty consistent. Consistency has always been a problem for him. And Angel Serpa, who I was ready to say, okay, I don't need to see any more Angel Serpa. Dude's not very good. After that Oakland outing where he was the opener for Greinke, I said, I'm good. I don't need to see him for the rest of the year. And now we're seeing in kind of a weird in-between role of he may give you an inning, he may give you 3, he may give you 2. He's been pretty good. He's found a spot he's comfortable in. Velocity looks pretty good. despite missing the entire year. He's 95, 96. Maybe next year, if he's just a bullpen guy, you have a guy that throws 97, maybe ramps it up to 98. I mean, you're telling me you wouldn't take a 97, 98 mile per hour throwing Angel Serpa in the bullpen? I would. Now, I'm still not going into 2024 giving these guys locked spots, but maybe keep them on to compete in spring training. They show they can compete. Well, maybe you have something going there. I mean, the Royals let a lot of bullpen guys go last year that ended up finding success elsewhere. Do you want to do that again? Now, Gabe Spire found success. Yoel Payamps is one of the best setup guys in the National League. Royals just let him walk, just DFA'd him. Now, Richard Lovelady looked good before missing the entire season with an arm injury. Maybe the Royals do have something. Maybe they don't. You buy into September numbers or you don't. Me, I'm just tweeting out stats. I'm just bringing up stats, and I'm trying to do that for something to talk about. And look at that. We have a second segment in today's episode. But coming up next, we are going to talk about Zack Greinke. Folks, if you are a sentimental person, if you're an emotional person with this team, this is one of the last times you'll be able to see him pitch at Kauffman Stadium. In fact, Friday night may be the last chance for a lot of us to go out there and see Zack Greinke. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further and talk about the last couple starts for Zack Greinke, let's give a shout out to one of today's title sponsors in Jase Medical. Modern medical care and treatment are important, but our global supply chains are fragile. Things like pandemics, natural disasters, and foreign travel may cut you off from the treatment you need. Jase Medical is your solution. Just fill out their online form, and one of Jase Medical's board-certified physicians will review it to determine whether medications are safe and appropriate. Then Jase will send your prescriptions to one of their partner pharmacies, where your order will be filled and mailed directly to your home. You can also send your physician a message for answers to treatment-related questions anytime. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical Plus, an additional $20 off by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASEmedical.com. I think at this point in the season, there's certain points where you can really appreciate players on this team. You can get your last couple trips out to Kauffman Stadium, and you can just sit there in a ballpark and watch a very simple game. America's pastime, if you will. I mean, I'm certainly going to try to get out there in these last couple homestands. I mean, they got Houston and Cleveland coming up, and the final series of the year is against the Yankees at home. I will be at hopefully at least one game in every single one of those series just to appreciate it, because as you know by now, I'm a big baseball guy, diehard Royals fan, and I know it's going to be a long time before we can go back out to Kauffman Stadium and watch some baseball games there. It's an incredible experience for me. I know that for some of you, when the team's this bad, you don't want to go out there. I don't blame you. I don't blame you when the product is this bad. But if you're just a baseball lover, you'll probably be going out to Kauffman Stadium just to soak in the last little bit of warm weather and just watch a simple game of baseball. But now there's an extra element to this, because Zack Greinke is going to start on Friday night. He is, at least right now, per Matt Quatrero, per MLB.com, the starter in this game against the Astros, his former team. The next time he will start is a Thursday afternoon game against Cleveland. It'll be the final game of this quick 2-series homestand. And then the Yankees will come to down at Kauffman Stadium. Unless something drastic changes, he is not going to start in that series. He will get another start at Comerica Park in Detroit. So this is it. If you're going to go out to the game tomorrow night, for KU, K-State, Missouri fans, game's not till Saturday, KU and K-State. Or K-State plays Missouri at 11 a.m. KU plays at 9:30 on Saturday. So Friday could be open to you. And you want to go out to the park, because that very well could be the last time you see Zack Greinke. Some of you may go out to that game on Thursday against Cleveland, but a lot of us work. Or a lot of us can't get off work, I should say. If you can, more power to you. You can probably see the last start that Zack Greinke ever has in a Royals uniform. Maybe the last start we ever see at the big league level. He could, I guess, come back and pitch in independent league. Maybe he goes and pitches for the Savannah Bananas down the road. I don't know. I don't think that really fits Zack Greinke's personality. So this could very well be it. Your last chance to go see Zack Greinke. And this year has been a struggle. This year has been a drag, and it's been hard on Zack. It's been hard on the Royals. He's 1-15 with a 5.51 ERA or 5.47 ERA, something like that. It's been ugly. It's been hard to watch. It's truly been a guy that is losing, and not just losing, getting dominated by Father Time. He's never looked like this before in his career. I know early on, that 2005 season, he lost 17 games. He just looked overmatched. A young kid that was overmatched. He was 21 years old. We haven't seen Zack look this outmatched before. And it's probably likely that Houston gets the best of Zack Greinke. He pitches better at Kauffman Stadium, but this for sure, maybe I shouldn't say for sure because you never know with Zack Greinke. At least I'm going to stick my neck out there. This for sure should be Zack Greinke's final night start at Kauffman Stadium. Prime time start at Kauffman Stadium. Now, he's going to pitch on Thursday, and it's unfortunate because Zack is going to be throwing in front of 7,000 people against Cleveland on a Thursday afternoon. Hopefully good enough weather. But it's coming down to it now. This could be your final chance to go out there and see him. And me personally, I'm 24 years old. I've only known Zack Greinke in Major League Baseball. I don't know what Major League Baseball is like without Zack Greinke. And I'm probably going to find out next year. I went to games in 2004 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 where Greinke was the focal point. When I was younger, when I was little, when I was pitching in Little League, who did I try to model myself after? It was Zack Greinke. So to me, it's kind of a full circle experience. Going from growing up and having the jersey, the Zack Greinke jersey, trying to model how he threw, have the mentality that he had on the mound of nothing bothers you. You tune out everything. He doesn't think he's even pitching in front of everybody. Stoic on the mound. To now, flash forward 20 years later, I'm sitting here doing this podcast talking about what is likely going to be his final home start at Kauffman Stadium, or at least next week it will be. And we'll do a dedication. We'll do a little tribute episode to him on that Thursday because there's a lot of good times. There's a lot of great Zack moments. And if you've been a Royals fan long enough, he got you through some really ugly years. Now, this one's been ugly, but he got you through the 05s, the 06, the 07. The 2009 year was incredible to watch. He won a Cy Young. Every time he took the bump, you were seeing an incredible outing. You just knew with Zack coming to the bump, he was going to shove. And you'd have the K's being hung over the top deck, for how many strikeouts he got. He was who everybody recognized with the Royals. The Royals were not a recognizable team to Major League Baseball before the All-Star game, before the World Series. That's really all this team had. And now we're kind of coming to the final hours of Zack Greinke's career. I'd be stunned if he tries to make a comeback next year. The Royals, unfortunately, they got to be in that spot where they say, even if he wants to come back, Zack, you can't. You don't fit into this future anymore. And I don't think you're going to fit in anywhere. It sounds harsh to say, but I don't know where else Zack Greinke could pitch. I don't think the stuff is there anymore. So hopefully in these final 3 starts, he can look like a competent pitcher, a competitive pitcher, because it's just been a drag for him this year. He has 1 win. A lot of that has been run support or lack thereof, but he's been a poor producer this year. So hoping these last 3 starts against Houston, against Cleveland, and Detroit all go very well for him, because I think he at least deserves that. He's earned that to go off and have some success in what is surely to be a Hall of Fame career. That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Tomorrow, we're going to have our Mailbag Friday segment, so keep your questions coming, and I'll be answering them next time on Friday morning on Locked On Royals. You take it easy, Kansas City.